Welcome to my honest opinion on Gears of War E-Day, what I liked, what I didn't like, and my overall thoughts on the game after playing the open beta. The Carter controversy. Let's start with the topic everyone seems to be talking about, the new character Carter. There are already concerns among fans about how prominently Carter has been featured. For example, during the beta, Carter was the only character to receive a new skin. On top of that, in PvP, the KOG characters will often show approval whenever Carter does something during a match. Personally, I don't think that was necessary. In my opinion, it would have made more sense to give to all characters new skins or at least Marcos and Dom. I know that if you pre-order the game, you get skins for Marcos and Dom. But the funny thing is that the other character, Lucas, didn't get a new skin. Fans who have followed this franchise for years know how important those two characters are. People were genuinely surprised and even emotional when they saw Dom rescuing Marcos in the first trailer. That moment immediately reminded fans why these characters are so important to the Gears franchise, and it helped build excitement for a new game. But with that out of the way, let's actually talk about the game itself and my overall impression. My overall impression, I think Gears of War E-Day looks good and is heading in the right direction, but it definitely has some issues that I think need to be addressed. The game went through both an early beta and an open beta. I'm only going to talk about the open beta because that's the version I personally played. I know the coalition listened to feedback from the early beta and released an update before the open beta, so some of the issues is already be put on the open beta. Let's start with movement and camera issues. When you're fighting an opponent at close range, the camera behind your character can sometimes feel stiff or sluggish, almost as if it's fighting against you. This is something I didn't experience in the same way in previous installments, so I want to use Gears 5 times as a comparison. Here you can see me struggling to quickly turn and face my opponent. In Gears 5 times, that situation feels much more responsive. I believe this comes down to the camera mechanics. I really hope the coalition takes another look at this because there are moments when you want to quickly turn left or right, but the camera seems to work against you, making it harder to react fast enough. And when you're playing PvP, those split-second reactions can make a huge difference. Mechanics that were removed. Now let's talk about some of the mechanics that have been removed from Gears of War E-Day. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to use Gears 5 to show some examples. 1. No roadie run. The roadie run was introduced in the original Gears of War, and as you can see, E-Day no longer uses the traditional roadie run. Instead, it has been replaced with a more standard running system. This was one of the changes that surprised me because the roadie run has been such an important part of Gears movement for so long. At the same time, E-Day introduces jumping and sliding, which are completely new movement options for the franchise. 2. No environmental hazards were introduced in Gears 2, but they are not present here in the same way. Maybe because it's a beta, when the game comes out, maybe we'll see that. 3. No chainsaw duels. Chainsaw duels, another mechanic introduced in Gears 2, are also missing. 4. No mid shields or shield bombs. Mid shields and shield bombs, which were also introduced in Gears 2, are currently not part of the gameplay experience. 5. No grenade traps. Grenade traps were another mechanic introduced in Gears 2, and they are also missing. 6. No mantle kicks. Mantle kicks were introduced in Gears 3, but they are not available in E-Day. 7. No pull and kick cover. Finally, the pull and kick cover mechanic introduced in Gears 4 is also missing. That was the ability to yank an enemy over low cover or vault over it and kick them. These are quite a few mechanics that are no longer present. And honestly, I'm surprised I haven't seen more people talking about this. A lot of people are saying that E-Day has returned to the roots of the franchise. And from one perspective, that's true because many of these mechanics weren't available in the original Gears of War. However, the game is also introducing new mechanics like jumping and sliding. So it's not simply going back to the original formula, and I think that's okay. The developers need to find a way to make E-Day feel like classic Gears while also giving the game its own identity. But I don't think they had to remove those mechanics, though perhaps it's due to the new control scheme we'll talk about later. Executions. One thing I really hope they improve before launch is the variety of executions. Of course, each weapon has its own execution, But during the beta, I wasn't able to perform all of them. I only managed to see the Lancer and Yasher executions. Hopefully, the full game will include a much larger variety of executions, because those have always been one of the most entertaining parts of Gears, stopping power, and the Nasher. Another thing I think could help balance the multiplayer is stopping power. With the Nasher and the new mobility options, including jumping, I think stopping power could play an important role in keeping close-range combat balanced. But I think that instead of balancing the weapons, they should increase the damage over distance. That would be much better. We already saw mechanics like stopping power, mid shields, and grenade traps in Gears 2, and those mechanics help provide additional counters to aggressive movement and wall bouncing. I honestly don't understand why some of these mechanics weren't brought back, especially now that the game has additional mobility options, and I think these mechanics could also make modes like Horde and multiplayer more interesting controls. Before we talk about Horde, let's talk about the controls. As a long-time Gears of War player, one change I personally don't like is the way you sprint. In previous Gears games, you would hold a button to perform the road you run. In E-Day, you now press down on the left stick to run. For me, that's a problem. The reason is simple. I've always felt that constantly pressing down on the left stick can put unnecessary wear on the controller. And when you're playing PvP, you're constantly using that movement. I understand why the developers may have chosen this control scheme, especially with the new movement mechanics, but I still don't understand why they couldn't have kept the classic layout as an option. Active reload, then we have the active reload indicator. In classic Gears, the indicator was located in the upper right portion of the screen underneath the weapon display. In E-Day, it has been moved to the center of the screen. A lot of people complain about this, but there is actually an option that allows you to change it back to the classic Gears layout. As you can see, you can actually change it. So at this point, I don't think the active reload position is a major issue anymore. I think some players either forgot about the option or simply became accustomed to the new position. The Lancer, one thing I actually liked was what they did with the Lancer. However, I'm still not sure why the weapon's power was reduced during an active reload. As a Gears player, I've always viewed the weapons this way. The Lancer is excellent for the campaign in Horde, while the Nasher is the weapon most players gravitate toward in PvP. That has basically been the Gears formula for years. The first game was probably the one where the Lancer could more consistently down and eliminate enemies at longer distances. In later games, things became 50-50, but the Nasher remained extremely important to PvP. And believe me, I learned this the hard way. The Lancer is an option, but when it comes to Gears PvP, the Nasher is usually the real solution. Horde Siege. Now let's talk about the new Horde mode, which is called Horde Siege. I can't say too much about this because I didn't play it extensively, but from what I did play, I didn't think it was bad at all. My biggest hope is that when the full game launches, we also get some form of classic Horde. What I played of Horde Siege was solid, and I think this could become a go-to mode for players who aren't necessarily interested in PvP. There are also other Horde experiences available, but unfortunately I didn't have enough time to try all of them during the beta run. Multiplayer, finally, let's talk about rank. I played a few ranked matches, although there were times when there simply weren't many players around. Personally, if you're just looking to have fun and experience the multiplayer, I would stick with social unless, of course, you enjoy getting extremely competitive, because ranked can get very sweaty very quickly. And trust me, you might want to keep that controller somewhere safe. Final thoughts. So, overall, I came away from the Gears of War E-Day beta with a good impression. This is my honest opinion based on what I experienced during the open beta. The game has potential, but there are definitely areas that I think the Coalition should continue working on before launch, especially the movement and camera, the missing mechanics, the balance of the weapons, and the new mobility system, and the overall multiplayer experience. But now we have to wait for the full release. Once the game is finally out, I will be able to properly analyze everything: the campaign, multiplayer, Horde, weapons, mechanics. Gears of War E-Day truly manages to bring the franchise back to its former glory. We'll have to wait until the game comes out. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below. I'll be covering both the single player and multiplayer of Gears of War E-Day, so there will be plenty more content coming. Let me know what you think about the beta, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Peace!